All right, and we are officially beginning. Noa ia, bula, yagoe. Welcome to our third webinar for the Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport rolling series as we build up to MEPC 82, domestic shipping transitions, opportunities and barriers. Just before we begin, just a bit of housekeeping. So if everyone could please, while the webinar is happening, you please keep your mics, just check if your mics are on mute. The participants I will introduce the participants, especially our panelists today. And if you please have any questions, do please raise them in our chat group that we have. All the questions will be passed to our panelists if after their talanoa, and if we go over time, then we'll keep those questions and then we'll reply to you on your email. For everyone also to please know that our webinar here today is recorded. So if you are not comfortable with showing your face, I know everyone here has a beautiful face. If you're not comfortable, you can always block your video, or if you don't want to ask a question, you can always mute your mics. So we have planned this webinar to be an hour, but because everyone knows we are here in the Pacific and in the spirit of island time, Pacific, Caribbean, our island life, we are happy to keep the talanoa going a little bit over time for those who have the energy to continue our talanoa. Now, friends, colleagues, we are now in the month of June, and as the maritime industry gears up for the 82nd session of the MEPC, the spotlight is on crucial decisions to be made at the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, regarding equitable transitions and the levy. The work at the IMO is intense, but our new Secretary General, Arsenio Domingo, reassured us at the first Global Supply Chain Conference recently in Barbados last month that we will have a price on emissions, and we are on track to have the basket of midterm measures agreed at MEPC 83 next year. All of which is all about promoting and incentivizing big shipping to undertake the greatest and fastest technology transition in shipping history. They are calling it a trillions transition, a complete revolution in ship design and operation. So new engines, new ships, new fuels, and essentially in a single generation. Almost every day, there are new announcements on shipping news sites around the world. So there's hydrogen ships, ammonia fuels, methanol-powered pilot vessels, Flettner rotors, foil sails, electric cruise liners, revolutionary new propellers, all of these exciting new technologies for every size and every type of vessel that one can imagine. But today, we will be moving our lens from the big picture global scenario to focusing to the sharp end of the transition for the smallest states. For us, we're maritime people living on these islands and atolls and archipelagos in the middle of the world's greatest ocean. Almost all the breaking news that I read about development happening for big shipping in the big world. There's almost no news of exciting breakthroughs and technology advances targeting especially our countries. So today we wanted to ask, what does this global revolution mean for the smallest and most vulnerable states, in the Pacific, the Caribbean, and our small island states? What does this mean for our domestic shipping transitions? What are the opportunities? What are the barriers? And what are the implications of the upcoming global regulations and policies on shipping for our states? The domestic transition we now need to go through at home is the flip side of our country's international advocacy work at the IMO. At the global scale, the Pacific's domestic transition is as minute as our share of emissions that we produce. We're only talking about a handful of ships, less than 2,000 larger vessels, and nothing over 10,000 tons. But for our states to transition this fleet to a decarbonized future in a single generation will be a greater financial and physical challenge than we have ever attempted before. For us, it's going to be a billions transition. So we will need a coordinated program of change. And to help us navigate the evolving landscape of Pacific domestic shipping, I would really like to welcome our presenter today, Ms. Athena Schutz, who is going to set our scene today by laying out a theory of change for this critical sector. And so Ms. Athena Schutz is a dedicated lawyer, affiliated with MCST, with an unwavering commitment to combating climate change and mitigating environmental impacts through legal frameworks and policies. Her journey into advocacy began during her tenure as a law student. Since then, she has immersed herself in a multitude of climate and environmental initiatives, seamlessly transitioning between roles in civil society and government projects. She's a familiar face at the IMO meetings. She assumes the role of a negotiator representing the Marshall Islands. Since December 2022, she has been a steadfast presence at crucial committees such as the MEPC, the Technical Cooperation Committee, and the Legal Committee. So her passion for affecting change through law and policy, she stands as a beacon of hope in the quest for a sustainable future. We welcome you all to put any questions if you may have for our panelists in the chat group, as I mentioned earlier, and we will open up for discussions after our main Talanoa and debates. Atina, welcome to our Talanoa. The floor is yours. Komol tata.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, for introducing me, and thank you to all the participants for joining us today. My presentation today is going to be quite dense, but I hope it's a good thing we have this like pretty the first thing. But yeah, so hello, Yaboi from the Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport, based in Majuro, which is the capital city of the Marshall Islands. So the Marshall Islands and the growing alliance of small island states has a profile for our work at the IMO, where we are at the forefront of efforts to design and implement a global and equitable transition for international shipping. But our efforts to decarbonize our domestic shipping fleets is less well recognized. So in 2020, RMI committed in its updated Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC, to targets of 40% reduction by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Highly ambitious though these targets are, but with the right financing and the right technologies, it is achievable. The Marshall Islands is the co-chair alongside Fiji. Thank you. Yeah, so the Marshall Islands, alongside Fiji, co-chairs the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership. It's a bold initiative to catalyze a transition in domestic shipping in our Pacific Island states. And it's a call for an immediate investment of $500 million to kickstart a shift to non-GHG emitting ships at speed and scale. We expect a significant GCF application to be the cornerstone of that initiative. So my task today is to put that investment call into perspective and to very briefly explain why it is needed. Then I want to outline for you the theory of change that we have been developing at MCST around the technology options that are available to us in the Pacific. So at the International Maritime Organization and other international fora, the Marshall Islands joins other Pacific and climate vulnerable voices in the call for all emitting sectors to take all possible action to reduce GHG emissions to the lowest possible limits. Along with the Solomon Islands, and now supported by a growing alliance of SIDS and LDCs, we are calling for a price on GHG emissions via a universal mandatory levy on all shipping fuel and an equitable transition that leaves no state behind. International shipping is now poised on the cusp of its greatest investment opportunity ever. A truly trillions of dollars transition that could see shipping move to new ships, new engines, new operational practices, and new fuels in a single generation. And if small voices speak loudly now, it can also unlock significant and realistic revenues to enable an equitable transition. The next slide, please. Our domestic shipping scenario in the Pacific is not a healthy one. As a maritime atoll, island and archipelagic nations, shipping is for us as railways, bridges, and freeways are for most countries. It is our absolute lifeline. We are entirely reliant on international shipping for all our energy, most of our food, and all manufactured products. Our domestic shipping is the only way of maintaining connectivity in island nations with EEZs measured in millions of square miles. Our maritime countries have the world's highest transport connectivity prices, the longest routes, and the narrowest economies. We are, essentially micro communities with minimal trading capacity. Our domestic shipping services are inadequate and substandard, except on the most profitable routes. The unfortunate reality for our unique maritime geographies is that while shipping is an essential social need, it simply doesn't have a workable business case. We are trapped in a vicious cycle where no investment and insurance capacity means we are reliant on either old, imported end of life, or donated aid vessels. We also have highly limited maintenance capacity and a rundown and undervalued labor force, requiring increasing state subsidization for basic service connectivity. It's not a new problem. In fact, the UN SCAP well captured it in this flow diagram more than a decade ago, and it's even more true today. Our biggest task now is to transition away from our chronic fuel dependency and still provide basic shipping services to our far-flung communities. If we don't, we will be trapped in spiraling costs for outmoded or out of outdated fossil fuels and dinosaur technologies. Climate financing offers a rare silver lining to the climate crisis, a once in a generation opportunity to transition to better, cleaner, safer, and more appropriate shipping. There are two basic questions that we need to answer. Firstly, what are the technologies and knowledge we need to acquire? What type of ship and fuels and operations will work for our Pacific needs? Second question is, how do we finance this now essential shift from fossil fuel powered shipping to alternatives in a single generation? It will require greater financial investment than any previously in the Pacific's history, and certainly greater than any state has gone through since independence. Our initial estimates put it north of $10 billion for six-pack plus countries over the next 25 years. I'm not going to attempt the financing question today. That is a subject for another Talanoa. Today, we are focused on the technology. What I will say is that there is increasing potential for the IMO GHG negotiations to realize real investment to address this exact issue. If many small voices speak loudly in the current IMO negotiations, and the earliest we should see realistic revenue flows is not until 2028 at the earliest. So potentially good news on the horizon, but not here for us today. And we need a pathway to kickstart this transition now. The next slide, please. We have been working on a solution. The PBSP, or the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership, is the result of a decade-long locally situated research. It is a country-led investment call for a minimum of $500 million in largely no regrets financing to catalyze a domestic technology transition in a collective of Pacific countries. So today I'm going to discuss the theory of change that we have built to support the technology aspect of the PBSP. But before I do that, let me put the technology transition into its proper context. Firstly, the needed transition from fossil fuel dependency to alternatives in one generation in a sector that simply is not a priority for most bilateral partners is greater than anything our Pacific states have ever attempted before, and a greater cost than our countries can afford to pay. But the urgency of the climate change crisis means that we have no choice but to attempt it. Excuse me.
Hello.
Apologies, my telephone is right next to me. So the technology transition requires a complete technology revolution. So this requires a complete technology revolution in our domestic shipping operations. But this includes fuels that are not yet at market. But the challenge ahead is not about just technology transition. For the first part of our journey, we are reasonably certain that we have available technologies we can start with. Importantly, there are systemic financing and policy barriers that need to be addressed. Implementing the PBSB will require a paradigm shift in program delivery, in governance, and in how we use climate financing. It will not be achieved with a project by project approach. So now the next slide, please. So global shipping is embarking on its greatest technology revolution since the invention of the steam-driven screw. Around the world, a range of technologies are being researched, developed, and increasingly deployed. New ships, new motors, and new energy management, new fuels. Each week, we have new announcements from first movers and market innovators. Obviously, these technologies are all at different levels of technical readiness. Some are at market and others are only at concept stage. But almost all global research is focused on the needs of large shipping and trading economies, and very little work has focused on the Pacific scale, like for the Pacific context. For the Pacific, the transition will not be a simple process of scaling down internationally proven solutions and applying them at Pacific scale. Pacific domestic vessels must service extremely thin and long routes. They must be small in size, given the transport demand, but able to operate as a full blue watercraft to extreme weather conditions and budgeted within the constraints of small Pacific Island economies and labor markets. We are far from any servicing centers and have minimal maintenance and fleet support capacity. So our research shows that the domestic operating scenario is sufficiently unique to warrant development of a bespoke theory of change. Of all the options available to the rest of the world, some are at level of technical readiness that makes them viable candidates for us to consider for immediate deployment today. We have done the initial work on identifying which of these technologies will be of most value in a domestic shipping scenario, but there is still a lot of work to do. The next slide, please. Research to support the implementation of PBSB has been ongoing for a decade. The first and hardest job was simply to get the issues visible in the policy space. For a multitude of reasons, shipping has lagged behind every other energy and emission emitting sector. While we have poured billions into solar panels and renewable electric projects in the past decade, investment in our domestic shipping transition has yet to happen. The green timeline shows that the various enabling policy milestones that we have now put in place, from the UN Samoa Pathway in 2014, all the way to inclusion in our updated NDCs. There is now finally general recognition that we must take on this hard to abate sector. At national level in RMI and in Fiji, we have set targets at 40% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Our research is that the initial 40% savings are available in the short term from a basket of available policy, operational, and technology measures. Sufficient knowledge is held to move now to a portfolio of coordinated proof of concept trials of identified lead technologies, including new build and retrofits. Next slide, please. We have also identified and have been researching a range of technologies that are not yet mature candidates for Pacific domestic deployment. Several of these have strong potential to prove to be game changers if the technology is successfully brought to market in the future. Wing ships, electric tugboats, foiling cargo craft, fuel cell propulsion, electrofuels. So these are some of the some of the technologies that are moving at speed, but they currently do not fit the Pacific scenarios, not yet. But with these technologies, we have put them in the shelf of future potential. We continue to build research partnerships with such technology developers and to monitor and collaborate on their development. For example, we have done this with Fleckner rotor technology with leading innovators in Germany, and with Wingships and OTEC, or Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion technology, in Korea. Next slide, please. The PBSB is a catalyst for a program of ongoing work, and it is not a project. It's not just a project. It is about building a long-term transition, and as such will require upfront and real commitment. We have identified 4 foundation measures that are elemental investments, and we need to invest from the outset to build this program on. The first and most critical is research and education. It is essential to build long-term, retained, and in-country capacity, and is required from across the sector, and from cadet sailors to ministers. Next slide, please. Maintenance and slipway capacity is the second foundation. Slipways are far and few between, and most capacity is aged and in poor repair. Many countries don't have any slipways. In Vanuatu last year, the Maritime Safety Authority gave permissions to 80 ships to careen on the beach for essential repairs because there is no in-country capacity. Having to move our ships thousands of miles to get to a few old and end-of-service life slipways is not efficient. Transitioning our shipping and maintaining our shipping must go hand in hand and be planned early. Investment in new and high-quality technologies or incentives to improve operational efficiency will be largely pointless without the capacity to install, service, and maintain vessels in region. The issues of lack of next slide, please. Apologies. The issues of lack of accurate, reliable data for our sector in the Pacific are legend. How will we know if we are successful without the data? We need to know what our shipping emissions footprint is today if we are to measure our reduction over time, especially if we want to earn carbon credits for doing so. Data includes the capacity to acquire, analyze, maintain, and store. Capacity includes the cost of training and retraining skilled personnel. It is our third foundation measure. Through our international research network, we have begun to plug some of these data gaps and are now beginning to combine shipping data at national, regional, and international levels with trade data. But there is a long way to go, and we must invest in this foundation measure from the beginning. Next slide, please. All of this requires a skill and maintained public and private sector capacity. The transition requires the capacity of our maritime institutions, such as the Ministries for Transport, Maritime Safety Authorities, Ports Authorities, and training institutions. Our government maritime services are already heavily strained. Despite our small size, we still need to maintain all the regulatory and governance functions that a large economy does. Our human resource is essential to this transition, and it cannot happen without it. We need to value, upskill, and retain a competent modern maritime workforce across the sector if we are to be successful. Next slide, please. With our foundation measures in place, then the period now between now and 2030 is mapped out with 1, ongoing investment in our human capacity. Second, a coordinated portfolio of designs and technologies and for proof of concept trials. We need to build a fleet of vessels across a group of countries to prove that these technologies work and are effective. Thirdly, an active research and development program for less proven measures. And finally, we need ongoing and technology transfer with our international partners. Next slide, please. So we're nearing the conclusion. So with adequate and appropriate investment, the initial 40% of Pacific NDC targets are achievable with available policy, operational, and technology measures. The first proof of concept new build ship, which is the Juranai, which we received recently from Korea, which is a 48-meter general purpose ship for the Marshall Islands Shipping Corporation, is targeting 80% efficiency. A range of vessel types for the a range of vessel types is needed at different scales across our group of countries, and so it becomes a process of rinse and repeat, with the results of each proven technology trials available from across the collective. Each country will be supporting its neighbors. This gets us a long way down the track toward full decarbonization. Moving past this, achieving full decarbonization will ultimately require access to alternative fuels and technologies that are not yet at market. The right choice of such alternatives for Pacific deployment is far from clear. Determining which future fuel the Pacific will adopt is going to be one of the biggest economic decisions that this generation of politicians will have to make. Ongoing investment in research, development, and deployment will be essential to determine appropriate Pacific pathways. However, there is no technology barrier to us starting now. As I said at the beginning, and I hope this answers the first question that is going to be posed, is what is the technology that we need for a paradigm shift? Financing for this is another question. So colleagues, this brings us to the end of our presentation, and I look forward to hearing the reflections of the panelists and their thoughts on their reflection. Omotada, and thank you for your attention. Over to you, John.
Come on, Latina. Thank you for the great presentation. And I think, colleagues, we all have this question in our minds. Is this a great theory? Is it real? This theory that Latina presented, are the technology changes real? And if it is, it's going to be a huge endeavor for our small countries to take on, given the varying experiences and knowledge from around the table. We ask ourselves again, can this be done? So to help navigate this question and hopefully to answer it, we have a panel of exceptional expertise. And I would respectfully like to introduce them. Our first panelist today is Mr. Gavin Albright. Gavin has been at the helm of the International Wind Ship Association since 2014 as the Secretary General, driving the global adoption of wind propulsion in commercial shipping with support from top academics and NGOs. As a key player was MTCC Advisory Committee and the board of the World Wind Energy Association. He's a force in the maritime innovation. Gavin has electrified international stages, chairing RNA's wind propulsion conferences and leading the groundbreaking Ambition 1.5C summit at COP23. He's an advisor on cutting-edge projects like WASP and decarbonizing UK freight. His expertise in sustainable development and alternative propulsion has shaped pivotal studies and contributed to the IPCC's crucial report on 1.5 global warming. Our next panelist after Gavin is Ms. Eldine Glies. She is a Mandela Washington Fellow, part of the Young African Leaders Initiative launched by former US President Barack Obama. She's also an ambassador for One Young World and a recipient of the Emma Watson Scholarship for Women Activists. She started her career over 15 years ago in Angola as a deck cadet. She has held various roles in the maritime industry, including cadet training officer, crewing manager, and HSE advisor. And adding to co-founding WISDA Angola, the Women in Shipping and Trade Association. She's currently a scholar at the University of Plymouth in the UK, focusing on sustainable maritime operations in the Pacific region. Eldine resides in Suva with her partner and 2 children. Our next panelist is Dr. Christian de Buchalai. He is a senior lecturer in culture and climate at the University of Melbourne and a visiting fellow at Aymara et Marseille Université. His latest book, Trade Winds: A Voyage to a Sustainable Future for Shipping, asks whether sailing ships can help decarbonize maritime transport. And our final panelist we have with today is Miss Maria Sahib, who's a dynamic leader in sustainable maritime practices and climate action with over a decade of transformative contributions to shipping decarbonization, fisheries policies, and environmental sustainability. Her journey from the shores of the Marshall Islands to her beloved Fiji has been marked by groundbreaking achievements over the past 5 years. Maria has been a powerhouse in driving the decarbonization of the shipping industry through cutting-edge research, passionate advocacy, and active participation in IMO climate change negotiations. Her work has sparked significant positive changes in this sector. Before focusing on shipping, Maria had substantial impacts in fisheries policies and management of the Marshall Islands government, gaining invaluable insights into sustainable resource management, and is now the coordinator of our negotiating Pacific bloc, the Six-Pack Plus in the IMO climate negotiations. She plays a pivotal role in shaping global maritime policies. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are our panelists. Great panelists, and I wanted to start off with you, Gavin, on on your feedback of this great theory. How does it work in terms of Windship? Over to you, brother.
Thank you, John. And it's the first time I've been called electrifying, which is very gratifying. So Komal Tata and Komal Tata Athena as well. Fantastic presentation. I think to answer the question from our perspective, the question of whether this can be delivered, is it the right plan? Are we heading in the right direction? I think the simple answer is yes. This is a regionally developed plan that takes in all of the elements around co-design, co-ownership, cooperation. And frankly, it's a really timely, or maybe even past time development to see such a detailed strategy on this and a real theory of the change that's required. From a technology perspective, or actually just before that, I think also this very much aligns with our call at COP28 from the International Windship Association for an SDG 17 delivery fleet for least developed countries and also large ocean or small island developing states. There's a great opportunity with the challenges that are facing the Pacific Islands to actually be not a testing ground, but a real pioneering region to actually implement the alternative energy sources and the alternative ways of propelling vessels, because we're talking huge distances. We're talking that really defy the let's burn fossil fuels to power these vessels. It defies that business model. One of the big problems, and I think Athena certainly alluded to this, is around the creation of a virtuous circle. So from the need to develop capacity needs to be done in tandem with the delivery of new vessels, of the technologies coming in, and again the co-design around there. I'll just give you a real quick précis of where the wind propulsion technology is currently. We're actually standing at 42 large vessels now with wind assist installed. These are above 400 GT, which is about 2.5 million deadweight tons of shipping that are propelled in part, or increasingly primary wind vessels are coming in as well. We also have a handful of dozen smaller vessels, and Athena mentioned the Duran-i, which was recently launched and named in Korea and is heading towards the Marshall Islands, and that will be a real flagship in there. Also that co-design of how the vessel is built, but also the operations that it'll be doing, linking that in with smaller vessels which are locally produced right now, locally designed and produced and crewed. that sort of hub and spoke usage, or a branch and twig usage of vessels is going to be a real key in the area. I could keep waffling on about this, but I think I'd like to hear the other panelists' views as well. But the technology is there. That is not the problem. Does it fit, or how does it fit with the Pacific needs? That is a challenge. And also identifying the stakeholders who can help co-design the systems and the networks and build, not just feeding the trade and the passenger volumes today, but actually creating a resilient network that feeds not a zero-sum game, but actually brings in resilience into the system and allows trade and passenger flows to grow and to mature as well.
True. Thanks, Gavin. That's true. The technologies out there. Just looking at the Pacific context, eh? Thanks, Gavin. Aldine, your feedback on that, or you have a response to the presentation, or for Brother Gavin, or electrifying Gavin?
Thank you. I wanted to focus on the to, I guess, take the conversation from what Athena and what you started off the conversation with, and a lot of the points that Athena mentioned. Let me just start by saying thank you for an excellent opening, Athena, for setting the stage for an important discussion on the opportunities and the challenges that are faced by Pacific Island states to decarbonize the domestic shipping industry. Pacific Islands contribute less than 0.03% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions, and yet they are amongst the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So when what John said, what Athena said, highlighted the scale of transformation needed globally and the critical juncture that we're at with the upcoming IMO decisions. So to dive deeper into what this means for Pacific states specifically, I wanted to highlight the glaring lack of proven local carbon technologies at small scale to facilitate access to maritime investments, financing and insurance. And then two, as mentioned by Athena, the lack of technical capacity and the expertise, which is another challenge. And they will be urgent need for specialized skills to operate and maintain these very innovative technologies as they arise. And so we find ourselves, I think the Pacific finds itself at a very disadvantage trying to play catch up at this point. So with the upcoming MEPC 82 discussions, they're expected to bring significant regulatory changes. And so it's therefore crucial that governments should provide clear long-term policy signals to give the industry certainty for these investments. I know we're not talking about the financial aspect of it, so I will focus on the regulatory changes in this aspect. And I wanted to give a really quick example because I have worked in the Angolan space and the Southern African space for a very long time. And Angola has this concept called Angolanization. Angolan is a sound in Portuguese. I just butchered that word. And it refers to Angola's policy aimed at increasing local participation and employment within its industries. It's particularly the oil and gas sector, but this can be paralleled into other sectors as well. And the policy aims to ensure that there's a significant portion of jobs and contracts that are awarded to Angolan nationals and companies. So the cornerstone of this policy is essentially, it was a presidential decree and it mandated that companies within its industry, particularly oil and gas, obviously, but that within the industry give preference to Angolans' goods and services components that I will touch on this, these local workforce quota and training and knowledge transfer, which I think is something that is always in discussion around what the Pacific and skills development. And so what this country has done is the law requires that up to 70% of the workforce in any company operating in of that workforce has to be Angolan citizens. And then foreign companies are required to then include training programs, detailed training programs in their contracts to ensure that the Angolan workers gain skills and knowledge necessary to make to take on more technical and managerial roles. So that's something that can also be to some extent maybe considered within the space that we look at every international company, that we look at every international organization within the shipping sector, within the maritime sector, and say, how do we regulate training and knowledge transfer into every single one of these sectors? And how do we say we need to actually require every company, every international organization operate locals? And it can be as ambitious as what Angola did. 70% of the workforce in every international company needs to be a local. And what that essentially means is it brings, as you bring in international companies, is because the Pacific is organizations are coming in, you leverage that popularity by saying, how do we train? How do we force you essentially to train that you're coming in, and there will be that transfer of knowledge, there will be that transfer of, but you have to regulate that, because in that allows that allows for something to an actual I guess framework for training within the Pacific. And then I'll let my other panelists also continue on the discussion, but I will just add really quickly that within the regulatory space too, it's also very important that you're advocating for very simplified regulations. So that's another solution to making compliance easier, especially for smaller operators, especially in a area where operators are small. This is a minute economy, so then the operators are also very small. You need to be able to simplify those regulations so that it makes for an easy ratification into whatever the organizations and the sector particularly. So thank you. I will let everyone else chime in.
Alvin, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a interesting view on that Angolanization that you were saying. Very interesting. I'll move it to Dr. Debukala, if you wanted to share and tell us more.
Yes, thank you so much, John, but also Athena, for the introduction of the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership and what is underway and what is meant to be accomplished in the next few decades. And I want to start out by saying how great it is to actually change the conversation, not just from the global level of climate diplomacy to the domestic level, but also from a kind of almost a negative story where we're constantly talking about the things we should stop doing. We should stop using fossil fuels, stop emitting greenhouse gases, and so on, to a very positive story that says we imagine a future in which these things are possible. We have thought through what we need to do in order to get there. And we have a strategy, we have a plan that works for the region, that works for the needs that exist. We understand where we can learn from initiatives that have been tried elsewhere, but we also understand where we need to do our own further work in order to make this happen and make this feasible at home. Because to come back to your question, John, whether this is more than, a nice theory, I would say absolutely. And I would, I'm not going to repeat what Gavin said on this, but you see a massive variety of fascinating initiatives that have emerged over the last 10 years. Because 10 years, 20 years ago, this would have been a very nice theory, but with relatively little substance. And right now, what you see is both in terms of alternative fuels, in terms of wind propulsion, in terms of imagining new types of vessels catering to these very different needs. So much is happening, so much experimenting is going on, that there is an awful lot of possibility to borrow from that, and to look at companies operating rather small sailing ships, larger ones, or ones combining that with new fuels. For example, Greenpeace just announced that they're commissioning a new vessel, their new flagship vessel, which will be primarily wind propelled with a Dyna rig, but will also use hydrogen and e-methanol as fuels. Again, and that shows that there are still some questions and tensions around what exactly the fuel will be that will be most useful in different environments, in different circumstances. And that will remain a big challenge for at least a few more years. But what you can really see in this theory of change and the whole pathway that has been sketched for the Pacific is that what you really need is to bring down those emissions as quickly as possible, which, given the size and scale of operations in the region, wind propulsion is a very clear option for most countries. And it will not bring emissions to zero. There will be a need for fuels. There will be a need for all types of vessels, and not all of them, will work with wind, and that's absolutely fine. But if we can bring that down really quickly, then there is a little bit more space to wait and see which of those other technologies that are right now in full development can be adapted and used for the region. So, and I think that, to me, is kind of the shortish answer to that first question, whether this is more than just a set of ideas, and it certainly is, because this is happening, not just in the Pacific, but also elsewhere. And what's mostly needed is just people putting their noses in the same direction, finding the funding needed to actually invest in these technologies, and maybe make a mistake or two, but for the most part, this will be a really positive story of change. Thank you.
Merci, Christian. That's a very good point on the narrative and how it's changed. I really like that. Maria, I wanted to give you space so that you could tell Anwar.
Thanks, Vinaka, John, and Kumul, to Athena for such a great presentation and entry into this debate. It really opens up the space for a very in-depth discussion into the technology transition that's needed in the maritime sector. Gavin, Alden, and Christian have done a great job in trying to address your first question, John. So I'll try to sort of tweak the conversation as something to get us started into the next round of discussions. But I think the simple answer to your question is yes. It's a huge undertaking, and the practical step must be to get a fleet of proof of concept vessels out on the water and working in our countries. Until our local shippers can see these vessels with their own eyes, they're not going to believe in them or the fuel savings they can bring. Like Athena said, shipping in our countries operates on such thin profit lines as it is. So our shippers simply can't be asked to take on the risk of adopting new technologies and being the guinea pigs. I just wanted to add one more point on the importance of and the strength of partnerships. And just as Gavin has said, the Juro-9 was a concept that actually began with us meeting with Kevin in 2012 on a project called the Green Heart Ship. At the same time, we meet with Michael Vaz and the Koshul Hamdan Lear team, and then Dr. Kim and all the Korean research network. So it's the partnership for us. It's really the partnership that builds new ships. So those are my very brief points on this, on the first run of questions, John. Thanks.
Oh, true, man. Thank you so much, Maria, for those points. I think they're important points to raise. I feel like I wanted to add on to the conversation, but before that, I wanted to also acknowledge that we have the presence of former Minister Kitlang Kabua. We welcome you, former minister, and also the Marshallese ambassador to South Korea, Albany Shoda. Thank you for being here with us. And I think Albany Shoda, he mentioned something really important to me the other day, and I wanted to share that just a few days ago, the largest gathering of Pacific indigenous cultures called the Festival of Pacific Arts, the 13th festival just happened here in Honolulu, Hawaii. And it was a space where where the region could come together like a huge family reunion. It's the biggest indigenous festival in the world. And it just finished a few days ago. And one of the highlights, some of the highlights that I found in regards to the oceans was the first one was the Va'a ceremony and the power of the transference of indigenous knowledge. And Ambassador Albert raised a good point on, the winds and the spirit of the people. So during this festival, the spirit was definitely present. There was a lot of mana being shared amongst the people, the transfer of the knowledge, the appreciation of, Micronesian, the Micronesian presence of Maupilug and the revival of the voyaging society. And I think that's a big plus on, acknowledging the spirit and the indigenous knowledge of the people that can help, interweave with these technologies, because we had Va'as traveling thousands of miles, like we had the Marumaru Atua from the Cook Islands that came over. Tahiti had their Va'a that came over. And so just, and symposiums that were based around the oceans. And I think I had the opportunity of sharing this exact work on MCST's work at the IMO to some symposiums, and the interest and the spirits of youth being interested within these spaces is also, a big part to acknowledge, so that they're very riled up and they're very excited about this work on the ocean. So I just wanted to share a bit of that on the festival that just finished, and I think that was an important part. So I thank you. Moving on, Va'a. So the Va'a or the Vaka or the voyaging canoe, in how we say in the Pacific, we call it the Va'a or the Vaka. Where I come from in Rutuma, we call it Tafanga. Fiji, they call it the Vaka. In Hawaii, they call it Va'a, Wa'a, however you pronounce it. But these are all connections of the oceans that we used. And I mean, wind was a big part of them. So, points to you, Gavin, for that. Just how we say we're looking back at the past to walk forward into the future. And I think that's a big part to realize that, with these new technologies, we're looking back at the past to move forward to the future. And I'm very appreciative of, the technologies that are now being introduced. And I think that's a huge possibility that can be interwoven into Pacific knowledge, and acknowledging that the knowledge they have done, just as our ancestors for thousands of years. I saw a comment on, I think if any of our panelists would like to give just a feedback on Andrew, brother Andrew, he made a comment on regulatory compliance demands led to scope creeping project. Cerulean for sure. Swire's risk mitigation in both design and financing was one of the barriers to further investment in the project. Brother Irvin, can you just speak a little bit about that, and then we can have our panelists, if any one of them would like to comment on that, on this project, Cerulean?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. So this is, the part of why I joined MCST, I mean, was to support the Marshall Islands. I was funded by Swire's Cerulean project, where we did a lot of investigation into building a vessel bespoke for outer island cargo and passenger transit services. And the folks who didn't work in the region did not understand the realities of the region, and it, just by the numbers alone, could not make sense to them. And even with the social and environmental co-benefits, it doesn't go into the books the same way. And so yeah, it was an issue of SOLAS. All of the different regulatory safeguards they put in place for their larger vessels, it's all, in the interest of reducing liability and making sure that they are able to operate without exposing the business to losses. And it's just finding solutions that properly align demand different systems. Like you can't unpack all of the wicked problems involved in the way that markets are or not regulated effectively. And so all of those problems that are writ large across the system, we got to kind of pick apart and see how they are barriers to the Pacific getting what it needs through the existing systems. So really, really useful exercise. And yeah, happy to talk about it further with anyone, but I won't take up more time chatting about it here unless people have specific questions.
Cheers, brother. Thanks, Andrew. Gavin, Christian, do you guys have any comments on that? Or
Yeah,
yes,
more
Gavin,
than
go.
happy to. Yeah,
Electrify us.
Well, we got to find a wind analogy there, not an electric one.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean the risk mitigation and the risk profile, obviously for a lot of the larger commercial shipping companies, they're very much looking at that economic payback period. One of the big problems is that we've externalized a lot of the costs, the total cost of ownership and the total cost of operation of vessels. So everything has got siloed off. Greenhouse gas emissions, well, we should be looking at all emissions, the underwater radiated noise, all of the emissions that impact climate, local pollution, etc. The fuel price, which is very rarely looked at in a sort of purchasing power parity, where local currency is actually being used to purchase fuel domestically, as opposed to sorry, it's dollar denominated fuel prices, but local currencies have to be used to pay for that. So there's a depressed fuel price, and we will probably see that with subsidies for alternative fuels in the developed world. So that already suggests that the real price of operation is not being reflected. But also the social returns are not incorporated in that very basic economic ROI. So the social impacts of having limited service in a region, or no service in a region, no fuel being available in a region, are simply not brought into the equation. So I think that the de-risking, you have to have some form of partnership, some form of ability to place those costs into financial terms. Otherwise, the ROIs simply don't work, or are very, very challenging to work. I don't personally know exactly how to do that. Obviously, a carbon price or some form of carbon pricing mechanism is going to be one step forward, but really taking a holistic view of the total costs and of shipping or lack of shipping are really, really important as well. So I think I've just expanded the problem as opposed to solving it. So apologies.
No worries, Gavin.
But
Thank you for that.
one last
Yeah.
thing, John, though, is the technology, the wind propulsion technology. The actual risk of that is diminishing very quickly. We've got a lot of demonstrators, so it really is around the operational business case as opposed to does this technology work? It does.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, brother Gavin. Thank you for, instead of electrifying, thank you for blowing us away. I wanted to pass it to the floor if anyone has any comments or questions for our thing. And I noticed that I think Boris Piel had a very good comment about Tahiti, about French Polynesia. Boris, are you able to share with us your question or your comment that you raised? I think we'd love to hear about that.
Hi.
Boris?
Hi. Yeah, John, do you hear me?
Merci. Oui, allez. Merci bien.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, Yaronara, Alonga to all. Yes, just to share you a little news from French Polynesia that we have a wind-assisted vessel that is under construction in Spain. We have been working on this project since 2021. And now we wish to see her coming in houses in 2026. So this vessel will be a 4,500 tons vessel to operate in the southern island of Austral. And so we are setting around 1,500 nautical miles per week. So yeah, we need it for our survival. We need it for the island, the cost of the freight to first lower the cost, and then of course going to decarbonize. So it's a real, for us, this project is a real surviving project, and well, we went through, and the vessel will be able to be, I mean, modified within the 20 years coming. Depends on the technology that will be available on the market. For the moment, we are on electrical diesel electrical propulsion assisted with wind, but it will be for the future. Maybe we can choose another solution to do electrical, but it will be a very like a Swiss knife vessel that can be studied and adapted to future technology. That's all, folks.
Maruru, Boris. Thank you for that. I think that's something we can touch base more with learning about this amazing case study. Colleagues, we have gone at least 5 minutes over time, and I know everyone has their schedule. Some of you guys, it's I think after midnight there, but I just wanted to acknowledge everyone for your time. We're now finally ending our Talanoa for now until our next one. Our next webinar will be on the 3rd of July Pacific time. We will send out the flyers, but keep in mind that our team is always trying to have these conversations in the build up towards MEPC, the next one. It's a really good discussion, and I think more people need to talk about it. And I see my sister Maria wants to highlight something. Go ahead, my sister.
Sorry, John, I kind of just really wanted to pick some points on what Andrew said about investment, and also Gavin raising points about resources. I mean, as I think everyone is aware on this call, that we need to accelerate transition internationally, and the international shipping has contributed about 2% of global emissions, and we, the PCs, are living it and are forced to live with it. And so we're asking for the transition, at least the transition for shipping to be to support the global south, and also in keeping the transition where no one is left behind, so just an equitable transition. And so that's why our work at IMO is such an important one. And Gavin raising the point of the levy on helping that transition. But in terms of a regional transition, just to put the quantums needed to be invested into context. So in terms of building a fleet of small vessels and providing them to our countries at no cost because of the societal benefit they provide, we are already doing that today. We've been doing that since 2017. So under the Pacific Guardian class patrol ship program, Australia is building and distributing a 22-ship fleet of a 32-meter vessel for 13 island states. So the ships cost about 50 million each and come with a full life maintenance, training and fuel budget within an overall budgeted at about 2.1 billion Australian dollars. That alone employs over 200 highly skilled and paid shipyard workers in Australia. While these vessels have a different function than the ones we're talking about, border and fisheries patrol rather than cargo and passenger transport, they're essentially a similar cost and scale. So apart from the machine guns, they are essentially small steel commercial vessels designed for Pacific Islands network. The point I want to stress in this example, the patrol boats aren't being offered as loans. None of our countries can actually afford to own and effectively operate them. But we have justified the investments of development aid on the societal good it provides and the downstream benefits to our countries. In any case, the enhanced border and fishery control specifically in this case. So surely the same logic should apply here. Investing donor support to demonstrate that this transition is real and available to our countries. And someone raised on the issue of carbon credits. I just wanted to add another interesting element into this debate. In one of our, if you had noticed in Atina's slide, there was a bar graph with some of the modeling work we've been doing. We estimate Fiji shipping to generate more than 300,000 tons of carbon a year. Solomon's about 200,000. So if Fiji cuts its emission by 40% and carbon is worth $100 a ton, that's $12 million a year. If Solomon Islands cut all its emission and carbon was about $150 a ton, that's about 30 million a year. So given all the problems, these are varying around varying offsetting schemes, and the whole crash in that market, verifying savings in shipping emissions with new ships should be relatively straightforward. Both Australia and New Zealand have loudly signaled that they need to buy offshore carbon credits to offset their national commitments. Could they buy them advanced from the ship of fleets we now need to build? I just wanted to expand on that point. In that example of the petrol vessels that I've just given, is a high performance craft course. At full speed, they're burning 20 tons of fuel per day. Even at cruising speed, they're about 5 tons per day. So estimate each ship is generating about 8,000 tons of carbon per year. If those emissions were taxed at $100, then the petrol fleet cost would be about 18 million a year in carbon levies. That's enough to build 3 new small low carbon cargo ships. So I guess those are some of the points I wanted to stress on how we can be more innovative in terms of resourcing and have a more forward-looking and forward-thinking approach to our maritime decarbonization. I'll leave it at that, John. Thanks.
Thanks, gang. I saw Eldin also had her hand raised. Eldin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, John. I wanted to just quickly, briefly touch on a point that I think wasn't raised and might be very relevant here. The access to appropriate technologies for the Pacific and the idea of exploring green shipping corridors a step further. So what green shipping corridors are, for those who don't know, I think everyone in this panel has, specific maritime routes that are decarbonized from end to end. And so setting up this type of routes will involve using zero emission fuel or alternative energy, wind ship energy that we've been discussing right now, putting in place refueling or recharging infrastructures at ports, and deploying zero emission capable vessels to, I guess, demonstrate cleaner and more environmental friendly shipping along that given route. And so exploring the idea of green shipping corridors could allow the Pacific to potentially reconsider biofuels, for example, battery operated systems, systems that are suitable for smaller scale applications. So I know we are running out of time, but I wanted to put out there for discussion for discussion another time, maybe.
Thanks, Aldine. Gavin, brother, go.
Yeah, just a quick one. I thought I might mention something because Eldine brought it up. So
Yeah, sure.
I'll blame Eldine. I'll blame Eldine for raising this. Around the green corridors, well, actually tomorrow I'll be circulating the news of a European Space Agency call for tenders, which highlights we've put in a use case for this to get funding to analyze the green corridors or green plus wind corridors, because frankly at the moment the green corridors are mainly focused on fuel, and there's also another use case in there which is around the coordination of small vessel applications. Now what we're hoping is that some of that funding will be able to extend that a little bit more to developing regions, although the eligibility for the core one is Europe and Canada and a few other countries. But this is certainly something that we're looking at to develop further. And I think, frankly, the Pacific is the absolute perfect area to really stress test those types of approaches and innovation applications. So you heard it first here.
Thanks, Gavin.
No worries.
Thank you all for your time. If you have to leave, you can leave, but I'm going to keep the conversation going because the conversation is going really well. I think anyone had any other comments on that? I think this is a great time to discuss. I also wanted to acknowledge Dr. Pete mentioned, the problem with corridors is that they are a voluntary measure that favors big shipping and big trade. Of all the green corridors announced to date, none are for countries like ours. That was a point raised by Peter. Thank you for that. Anyone else has comments? I know Jean-Emmanuel, you raised the point about the Festival of Pacific Arts in the past provides opportunities to accelerate urban infrastructures and the beautification in the hosting country as libraries, museum, cultural center. What about the future? In 2012, 7 new VACA arrived in the Solomon Islands. Jean-Emmanuel, can you please expand a little bit on that, on what the question was? If you're still with us, Jean-Emmanuel.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, brother.
In French or in English? No, sorry. I tried. I just make this comment in the conversation to remember that. Sorry, non, je peux pas parler en anglais.
Okay. Okay. No worries. We can share later, but thank you for that. That's a good point. From what I got from the question, brother, was, as host countries, you have the Council of Pacific Arts and Cultures that helps, organize the festival. And so there has been, since 2012, 7 new VACA. So this VACA ceremony has been an important aspect of the festival, where countries bring their VACAs, their voyaging VACAs. So they voyage with all natural wind propulsion, or like natural everything, navigation and all. And they bring their vakas, and there's a whole big ceremonies of exchanges between the different countries in the Pacific that come. And so the current festival that just happened, where there was vakas from Rarotonga, from Tahiti. There were also from Micronesia that came. Those that couldn't, they also brought they brought their vakas, and they constructed them here, and they helped all of these exchanges that were happening, and it was very opening. I'm going to send a link to the videos that we have here, but that's a very good question about, you know, how the host countries can continue to be spaces of learning and archives for these ceremonies to continue. We have a question. Oh, need to drop. Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate your time. Gavin, you have your hand raised again. Oh, and then we have Eric.
Okay,
Oh,
No, I was just waving goodbye because I have to
Oh,
drop. My
okay.
apologies. Thank you for
Appreciate.
a really great presentation.
Thanks, Eric. We appreciate you. Have a good one.
Sorry,
Gavin, brother,
John.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say something that Maria brought up, and what you're talking about there, John, is any transition is only as good as the people that are acting in this zone to actually deliver it. And I think that the pride and the leadership in this area really should, I mean, with thousands of years of experience of navigating the world's biggest ocean, this really needs to be, we need to be hearing the voices from the Pacific and the leadership from the Pacific on this. But what I'm concerned about is the gap between, you know, we're a collection of people that really understand this, but I'm sitting in the IMO, but also in a lot of other forums, and there's always talk about the future impact or the impact on my children, blah blah blah. This is impacting now, and we have the solutions now, and that disconnect. I'm just wondering. I'd really like to hear what the other panelists and yourself. How do we bridge that gap? Because we've been trying for so many years, and a lot of things are aligning. The technology is aligning, the vision is aligning, the regulation is starting to come in, but we're still not seeing that ground rush or groundbreaking movement from the people in the industry, let alone the general public. But the people in the industry are still not getting this. And I think Andrew mentioned this as well. The people who haven't been to the region don't get the problems. They don't understand the challenges.
Good point, Gavin. Maria, you had your hand raised. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I believe I don't have the icon for it, so I'm just a bit struggling. But thanks, John. I mean, Gavin raised a really good point. I mean, it seems like the stars are aligning for maritime decarbonization. It's been, this discussion has been in the space for about, what, 20 some years. And so I think as long as Pete's been alive, so that's how long the conversation's been happening. But in terms of, you know, I mean, it's all good. We have the technology, we have almost the right technology, we have almost the right regulations. I guess now it's about the money. Where's that money coming from? I mean, the Pacific really can't afford to have projects and muffins, as Pete would like to put it all the time. But in terms of, you know, our progress at IMO, where that money is really coming from for our transition. And so we hope that, you know, come MEPC 82, there is that the convergence towards a levy. Now, what that levy would look like is another question, but we've been pushing to have a levy to be adopted at IMO for so long. It's just in the last 2.5, 3 years that the momentum has really been, gone up on this conversation. But the earliest time stream that the revenue will come in is about 2027, and in reality there is increasing risk of delay. We need to really move at speed and scale, and we need our bilateral partners and GCF and development partners to step up, because really at regional we cannot afford to be waiting for something that's going to happen in the future. We need the transition now. But what is so important is that they come to support what countries are asking them to do. As Andrew Radley put, people come here, and as Gavin already identified, people don't know our region. So the danger, of course, is that we get smothered by battalions of external experts, each with their own theory of change. We know we need a bespoke solution, and we know it's not a case of just downscaling big country solutions. What we can't afford right now is to have 20 different partners trying to pull us in 20 different directions. That's the reality of the Pacific. What we need is an ethos of experts on top but not on top. I also wanted to stress here just quickly the importance of human resource element. The transition really is all about the people that undertake it. If we want our people to feel empowered to undertake this journey, then we need to make them make it real for them. What qualification will they need? What new skills? What training? What we need to be able to map out on the career path, so they see a good future in this transition for them and their families. And it's about more than just the seafarers. It's all the support from the industries, the engineering shops, the naval architects, our regulators, our safety people, our maritime training academies, our transport ministers, our ports people. So our transition must be people focused, and it must be a whole of sector focused, really. The reason that the chair of our organization, MCST, is the Minister of Education is intentional. The transition to be durable long, we must start with building long term, and that means we start with education and training for this and the next generation. So I guess, for the Pacific, we see transition not just a technology change or how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emission from shipping. For us, transition really means and how do we improve the quality of life of our people. And that means looking at it at a holistic, in a holistic perspective. Thanks, John.
Amen to that, sister. Thank you. Andrew, you had your hand raised too.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was interesting as this, we were going through this conversation. I was looking at what Jan Hoffman had posted around the Portliner Shipping Connectivity Index, and just comparing Tuvalu as a capital port. Funafuti has the same connectivity index as like most of the war-torn ports in the Ukraine right now. So and I was just looking up, what's the most common, missile that the United States manufactures? It's the MIM-104 Patriot. $4 million a missile. They've made over 10,000 of them since 1976. The money's there. They're building things to travel across the planet and then blow up at the end. We can be using a $4 million boat for 30 years. It's just insane. Like we don't have the carbon budget to keep spending money on munitions. We shouldn't have to fight for this money. It should be, we just need to point out that everyone needs to stop acting like a jerk and causing violence to throw our carbon budget way off. I just don't know how else we're supposed to frame this conversation. The way I've been discussing it is the market is causing the Pacific Islands, all of the outer islands, they are the distal points getting frostbite, getting frozen out of a market that is concentrating on the keeping wealth circulating amongst core areas, and we're getting sacrificed to the market. So there's just no other way to frame this than a gross misallocation of our effort and resources as like a collectively multilaterally governed society. And that's my rant, my closing rant. Sorry. Just looking at the numbers, and it's really terrifying and frustrating.
I feel you, brother Andrew. You know, even here in Hawaii, there's the RIMPAC games that are just about to happen, which is crazy. So the RIMPAC are like military exercises that they'll be.
They will spend billions of dollars on that exercise.
Exactly. So, you know, you sometimes you think about the amount of where the money goes to and why. Yeah, it's puzzling. Gavin, brother, go. And then I wanted to pass it to Mr. Tristan afterwards. He feels, I feel like he wants to contribute. Go, brother.
Oh,
Gavin.
absolutely. No, absolutely. I don't think there's any way to argue against what Andrew just brought up there. I mean, that's absolutely squared away. I just wanted to touch on something that Maria was talking about. I was on a training panel earlier today in the Canary Islands, and I've done this a number of times where I've asked the audience how many companies are actually mandating staff, mandating capacity to go into schools, go into education facilities, and actually spread the decarbonisation word, actually engage. And we're looking at out of 100 people, out of 100 representatives from companies, we're looking at a scattering of hands. That, frankly, the how can I say, the pandering to ESG or sustainability or SDG goals is pretty weak, and pretty much tokenism that's being done here. So on individual company levels, we can be reaching out and offering capacity before that we actually have to be gaining or having external funding for that. But companies simply don't even realize the kind of capacity that they can deliver to these. So I think, you know, having a collective action where we get as many of our members, IWSA members, you know, available for training, for the educational development side of things is a quick win that we can do, and we'll certainly try to do that on a better level in the future as well.
Thanks, brother. Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. Tristan, my friend.
Thanks, John. Not sure I did need to come in. It's been very nice to listen. That's not something I do very often, so that's been good. But seeing as you put me on the spot, I have a couple of things that have been occurring to me. So one of them is the framing of this is domestic shipping transition, right? And so whilst the regulation that is developing in the IMO is hopefully going in the right direction, that doesn't normally, and I wouldn't expect it to touch domestic shipping. So the business case for the investment that's needed in domestic shipping needs to come from either the technologies and the options being cheaper than the fossil fuel option, or domestic regulation. And I didn't know whether we'd spend very much time on that, because there's still that option to look at domestic regulation. The problem with that is then obviously that you're essentially adding cost to society in the Pacific Islands, because you're internalizing a negative externality. So you're, in the long run, you're not adding cost, but in the short run, you're having this effect of increasing costs if you're just doing this through domestic regulation. Now, hopefully, there are revenues from the IMO, and those revenues are used for just an equitable transition, including helping countries in the region to undergo their domestic transition. So that would be one way to counteract that. But I guess it would be nice on a future occasion to explore that domestic regulation question a bit more. The other thing that's occurred to me, that we've been thinking about for a while here, is some of the domestic shipping solutions I think could be electrified. You had electrification on your list, but to make electrification really cost effective, you need to be using the batteries as frequently as possible, which means looking beyond their uses just on the ships to get from A to B, and integrating them into the way that you use power and electricity within island communities. And if you're not talking about battery electrification and there's a liquid fuel and it's a biofuel or a synthetic fuel or something, then there's a kind of supply chain of that liquid fuel that needs to be thought about. So I think I think the thing that it would be useful to explore how we could do some more work on is that more integrated system of energy transition, not just for the ship and the energy that the ship uses, but also for the broader local and regional uses of energy, to make sure that that's aligned, because that's how you will get the business case faster and the alignment to the use of capital sooner. Thanks.
Thank you, Tristan. Thanks for that. Pete, you have the floor, bro.
Yeah, thanks, John. Seeing you're gonna let Tristram and I couldn't resist.
Yes, go, bro.
Got a couple of quick responses to both of his points. The issue with the resourcing for the Pacific for domestic shipping is simply that it isn't a commercial business case. And so until we have donors and bilaterals and GCF and all those guys prepared to accept that shipping is a public good, it's not a commercial viable process in the Pacific. We need ships to move things around to keep our societies alive and our connectivity there, and the multipliers for it are in public good. But there is not a business case to make for fossil fuel ships or for new age ships that we're going to be able to run all these ships commercially. It's simply unrealistic. It's not the way our economies work. And that's the biggest barrier that we have to overcome. We've already wasted the last 4 or 5 years with numerous consultants coming in, trying to tell us that we need blended finance approach and we need commercial investment in the space. The reality is it's going to have to come as no regrets financing, based on the fact that this is an essential public service, as much as delivering healthcare or education facilities or justice or anything else. Shipping is an essential necessity for our people, but that doesn't mean that it'll ever make money. And that's been the whole problem with our domestic shipping problem ever since the days that the first external ships arrived here. So that was my answer to that. The electrification question, yes, classic example again of external experts coming in and not understanding the local scenario. We don't have renewable electricity in the Pacific. We do not have surplus of electricity solutions that are available for our everyday use, let alone for our marine transport. So there are major barriers before we can consider electrification. Electrification is not the next step technology in the Pacific. And there are a whole bunch of people coming in going, electric mobility, we've heard it from UNDP, we've heard it from ADP, we've heard it from the World Bank, electrify, electrify, electrify. The reality is we don't have electricity. And what electricity we do is fossil fuel based, by and large. So this again is why large scale solutions simply don't downscale to what we need in the Pacific and why we need bespoke solutions. So Jura shows us that we can get there with what technology we have on the table today, 80% efficiency with known mature technologies, wind assist propulsion, shaft alternators, all those sorts of things. So we need to concentrate on what we know we can actually achieve in practical sense today. Yeah. Stuff like electrification may come available to us further down the track. But if you think about the $2 billion that the donor community has poured into renewable electricity generation in the Pacific in the last decade, we have less than 3% penetration. Just adding those thoughts. Thank you very much.
And powerful thoughts they were, Brother Pete. Thanks for that. I think those are really good points that you raised. Friends, we've reached the halfway. We've reached the over time of Pacific time, and I really appreciate this talanoa that we've all been having. Maria, go ahead. We're on Pacific time. Go. No, it's good. It's good.
Discussion. I know people are ready to jump off. I just wanted to, with permission from Gavin, of course, we're excited to announce that we've established a Pacific Wind Propulsion Hub with the IWSA. And we are fully aware about the wind as a big part of our transition. Also excited about reading all the new developments and happenings internationally with Flettner rotors and wing sails of every description. The new Lion Ro-Ros launch on the horizon, the TOWT announcing a new fleet of sailing ships. So it's great to read all the new developments on the IWSA website, Gavin. And also, of course, we recognize you have a very busy, very busy schedule all year round. But can we look to organize a workshop with IWSA focusing on which of these developments is best for small states? And also, if we could think about maybe a side event in November, there's a Heads of Maritime meeting potentially or tentatively in November. So if we could think around an event for that time. That's all I wanted to say, John. I promise this is my last bit. Thank you.
Sad.
I'll say on tape, yes, absolutely to all of those. And actually what Maria was alluding to, I mean, I think in the last 10 weeks, we've had 54 ship builds announced, which will be delivered over the next 12 to 18 months, I think. So yeah, I mean, things are moving incredibly quickly, and quite a number of really exciting developments in the smaller vessel aspects as well. So yeah, we're delighted to do that. I just found out that I'm probably heading off to China in about 10 days as well. So I was hoping it would be lovely to swing by the Pacific on the way, but unfortunately I'm not going to get enough time, but we should organize something in person at some point as well. And it was great, Maria, it was great to see you guys in Singapore as well.
Thanks, Kevin. Hopefully
Thank you,
your
Gavin.
emissions will be negated in your, the green propulsion, at least for shipping.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks for
I better get some sleep now. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, just ending. I wanted to formally end our Talanoa. Thank you all. This calls for more talks about this. Hopefully, when we meet in person, Gavin, there'll be kava and then with some jams. We can get the discussion going on more. But thank you all for your time. I want to also thank everyone who gave comments and asked questions. Everyone who is present here virtually and those with us in spirit. Also wanted to thank the organizers of this event, the Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport. Please follow us on Facebook and on LinkedIn for updates. As I said, our next webinar will be in July, early July. Keep a lookout for that. It will be posted on our social medias. Again, thank you to everyone for this amazing discussion. Even though we went over time, but I think it was necessary, and it was very, very good discussions that were held. So till the next webinar, again, komol tata, foexia, mahalo nui loa. Thank you, guys.